Welcome to the Inspiring International Potential podcast. Created by GC International Trade, this podcast aims to fire up businesses in the northwest of England to explore their international growth potential. My name is John Quinton-Barber and I'm the host of today's episode. What better way to start a series than talking about the international market with my guest, Arshad Dadabhoy, International Trade Advisor, who has extensive insights about the Middle East as an international market to UK businesses, and Ross Anderson, Senior Executive at Bahrain Economic Development Board. But before we start, I'd like to signpost you to the GC International website where you'll find information about up-and-coming masterclasses. Go to international.growthco.uk/events. Right, let's dive straight in here. Good morning, Arshad. How are you doing?
Very well, John. Good morning to you.
Good morning. I'm intrigued by your job title. I think you've got one of the best job titles in the world, International Trade Advisor. If I was at school in the careers department, looking at the computer at what I'm going to want to do in life, and that flashed up, that would certainly stay on my screen. So talk to me about what does an International Trade Advisor do, and a little bit about you and about how you got into it and what you do on a day-to-day.
Well, the International Trade Advisor role is an exciting role, and I love every day of it. And we're here predominantly to help and mentor businesses of all sizes to grow. And that means if you're a sole trader or a small limited company, all the way up to the multinationals, we have something for you. That can be mentoring, it can be a fresh pair of eyes to help you through an export problem, or perhaps look at a new market, or get over some technical issues or difficulties you may be encountering. I've done international trade and business for over 20 years. I used to be an export manager previously, and I'm privileged to draw on my previous experience and to help companies to get into exporting. 20
years. Wow. Now, you'll have seen some things change. You'll have seen some challenges change. You'll have seen some opportunities. And I imagine, and I hope, you'll have seen some fantastic success stories over your 20 years.
Yes. I mean, the world's changed a lot in the past 20 years. A lot of things are now digitally and electronically done. Things move on a lot faster now with cloud and other electronic software available, so business can run a lot faster. But essentially, and this is probably the first take-home tip to our listeners out there, is people do business with people still, and it's all about relationships, cultivating those, working those, getting their trust and confidence, and that will never go away.
I love that tip. That is absolutely a tip for life, isn't it? About relationships and doing business. I mean, Middle East. So talk to me about the Middle East, Arshad. Why, as you said, I'm a business in the Northwest. I'm a manufacturer or in professional services. Why would I, what has the Middle East got to offer me?
It's an interesting part of the world. There's a lot of misconceptions, a lot of myths, and we can talk about that later on in this podcast. But essentially, the Middle East, they love Britain. They love the quintessential things of Britain. That a lot of them have studied here, or they had British nannies, or they link back their history and their sort of the British legacy that was out there. But in terms of why, many of the Middle Eastern standards are British standards. So it's very easy to get out there because they've adopted the British standard. They trust the British. They trust the ethics and the integrity of British companies. They know that what they see is what they will get, and the service that they'll, what's been advertised or quoted, they'll get that. There's a lot of integrity and trust in British companies. Another reason is profit margins generally tend to be higher in the Middle East than when you compare to doing business in Asia and Europe. So that's another thing. And also, we very often lose sight of the fact that those countries in the Middle East, they're still investing, they're still developing their countries, and they're still investing in telecoms, infrastructure, hospitals, schools, defense, IT, and all those areas. They're still investing in them, they're still building them. They're not as developed in some parts of those countries as they are here in Europe. So those opportunities are there, and that's another reason why I would strongly encourage UK companies to look at that area.
Massively agree. As somebody went to Dubai in the late 90s when it wasn't quite just a desert. Well, I've seen the changes there, and I've also Been fortunate to be been in Oman and Qatar, and absolutely agree with you there, Arshad. What opportunities are out there, and the culture is fantastic. But one place I've not been yet is Bahrain. I'd like to bring in Ross Anderson, who is Senior Executive at the Bahrain Economic Development Board. Ross, what a fantastic job title and a fantastic place to work. Talk to us about what you do and what opportunities there are in Bahrain.
Thanks very much, Sean. Great to be on today. So yes, as you said, I'm a senior executive within the UK International Office within the Bahrain Economic Development Board. And what we do, we're a government agency based at head office in Manama in Bahrain, who basically foster inward investment and foreign direct investment into the Kingdom of Bahrain. From the UK office, we work closely with head office sector teams and around a number of different sectors to actually generate leads and actually develop and create jobs in the Kingdom of Bahrain.
And what type of opportunities are there in Bahrain? What kind of companies are you seeing and are you advising?
Yeah, so the key sectors that we work across are primarily financial services, ICT, manufacturing, transport logistics, tourism, real estate, education and healthcare. So there are priority areas where we see growth, and we work across all of those sectors.
And that's a wide spectrum of sectors. Is that set by the Kingdom of Bahrain, or is that something that you're just responding to? How's that being pushed and pulled?
Yeah, so we work closely with central government in terms of a national strategy, and we're aligned in that respect as well. So those are also areas where we see growth, not only in Bahrain but in the Middle East generally as well. So Bahrain is sort of becoming a bit of a hub in some respects in these sectors as well. Fantastic.
Now, Arshad, Ross talks there about some of the sectors that are key to Bahrain. Is that the same across the Middle East, or are there any other sectors that we should be prioritising?
I think it's important just for our listeners' benefit. Let's just unravel. Now, the Middle East, a lot of folks out there will think it's just Saudi Arabia. Some will say it's the GCC countries, which is a small economic bloc of Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, Muscat, Oman, and Kuwait. So let's just talk and pick that a little bit. So the Middle East actually stretches from North Africa all the way to Iran, a very large area, and the disparities over there. I mean, look at the wealth disparity. You have Qatar, one of the richest nations in the world. We all hear about Qatar and Emirates. They're buying up chunks of Oxford Street and the UK companies and investing heavily. But then you've also got some of the poorest countries in the world, like Yemen, for example. That's probably in the bottom 5 in terms of wealth and GDP in the world. So we've got a big disparity out there. Look at, for example, population. Bahrain has a population of, Ross will know better, around 1.6, 1.7 million. Many of that will be expats. A small proportion of that will be the native population. And then you've got somewhere like Egypt, which is 90 million. So it's a very different place out there, just as you would expect in Europe. In many parts, the French culture is different from the Italian and the Spanish, and population sizes are different. So just wanted to sort of unpick that there and put that out to our listeners, that we are looking at a large region. Not all of it is wealthy. Not all of it has those opportunities that we want to go after. So we would, one of the tips again, for another take-home tip is to focus on the Middle East and focus on a particular region.
I love your take-home tips, Arshad. I was going to ask you, which relates to that then. So bearing that in mind, do you find that people have done their homework before they come to you, or are you helping them with their homework? Do you set in the homework?
It's a combination of both. Some people are dazzled by the bright lights of Dubai. Some people are think, yes, let's go out and do business in Dubai. I've been on holiday there, or I've seen, one of the football teams wearing the jersey, etc., and let's go and do something there. But it depends on the complexity of the market. It depends on what your product and service is. Always do your homework and then do it again before you go out and make that first trip. Each country is very different. Yes, those relationships, the inherent culture is there, but you've got Egypt, who have a pharaonic culture. You've got Iran, who are very steeped in and proud of their Persian heritage and that history out there. And then you've got Saudi Arabia and sort of that peninsula, the birthplace of Islam. And again, they have their own differences and sort of culture there. So it is a different place. Spending levels and market opportunity will vary from sort of block to block.
Just Ross, on that, I mean, do you have any kind of like triage system in place? So when a company comes to you, do you have like a very kind of quick checks and balances to kind of, do you have any phases they have to go through? Is there any kind of way that you know, what's the success rate, I suppose, are you seeing and experiencing?
So what the international offices do within the Bahrain Economic Development Board, we work closely with the head office sector teams. So if an opportunity comes to us, which is always great, we'll coordinate that project with the head office sector team, depending on who's got the expertise back at base. We'll then really work up a project or work up the opportunity with the client, make introductions and facilitate introductions to local partners on the ground if needs be, as well as introduce them to other agencies within Bahrain as well. There's a local public authority called Tamkeen, which has actually been set up to actually incentivise and improve productivity of the labour market in Bahrain, as well as assist businesses as well and enterprise. So we work closely with them. And that sort of support's available for all foreign direct investors. So from our point of view, the process is quite efficient. We work closely with head office, so you've got a point of contact on the ground in the UK with me or the other guys in the team, and you've got a local contact back at head office who has the inroads to these different groups back in Bahrain.
Fantastic. So that sounds like you've got a really efficient service there that is, you know, guides and hold them along the journey, which is great. Arshad, I want to talk to you about COVID-19. Now, the many threats and challenges of COVID are well documented. But are there any opportunities that you see because of COVID-19, particularly in the Middle Eastern market for export?
Yeah, let's just look at the months preceding COVID and what happened out in the Middle East. We saw a tussle between Saudi and Russia. The oil price tumbled. And then we saw COVID come in, and those large importing oil sort of consuming nations like China, US, Japan, India, so forth, their economies got hit with COVID, and therefore the oil price tumbled further as consumption dropped significantly, and these large oil exporting nations out in the Middle East were impacted in a big way. That has had a huge impact. We've seen countries like Saudi Arabia consider, although there's been a U-turn, but they did consider tripling VAT out there. That just gives you the size of the depth of the issue that they're suffering at the moment in terms of revenue and ways of plugging those gaps. That aside, yes, there are still opportunities out there. Yes, there is still money out there, and perhaps and there are signs of some recovery coming through, and some of the bigger projects that have been deferred. Saying that, there's also some geopolitical issues out there that I think our listeners need to know about. There's the blockade of Qatar. So some of the countries like Bahrain, UAE, Saudi, Egypt, and the UAE have sort of put economic and political sanctions, sort of broken the diplomatic relations with Qatar at the moment over some political differences. So there we have that issue there at the moment. So any of our listeners out there who are thinking of doing business at the moment in the Middle East and were thinking of launching, because they generally tend to do that, they'll base themselves in one of these Bahrain, UAE or Saudi, and then launch into Qatar or vice versa. That won't happen at the moment because of the blockade. So they'll need to bear that in mind, that, you know, there's no air flight. So if you're going to UAE and then wanting to go to Doha, that's not going to happen at the moment. So there are a few geopolitical issues going on. You've got a war in Syria. You still have the Israeli-Palestinian issue that's pending, and also a war in Yemen. That set aside, COVID has tested, I think, and that's generally around the world, the resilience of governments, nations, and economies. And then when we look at the Middle East in terms of opportunities post-COVID, I think there are probably 5 or 6 areas where British companies that can look at. Let's look at food and drink. Restaurants were closed. Food manufacturing has been tested. A lot of these takeaways and eateries out there move towards delivery-only model, just like they did here. And there was a run on the supermarkets, like we saw here too. That's driven a change in Middle Eastern sort of consumer behavior as well as restaurants. So there's a big demand now for long life foods, which traditionally in the Middle East people ate fresh, and foods were imported. Remember that there's a lot of meat and vegetables is imported into those countries because of the climate out there. So that's driven a demand for long life shelf foods and innovative packaging that will keep food preserved for longer. So that's one opportunity where British companies can look into and start exploiting. Another one is healthcare. Now, yes, PPE, ventilators, all the and medicines, they're in demand, but that we know that's a short peak due to the circumstances that we're in. But longer term, countries are going to now start to think about telemedicine, virtual care solutions, and digital sort of offerings in the healthcare sector. And along with that will be the infrastructure to support those, the cloud, the warehousing, the data warehousing, the IT infrastructure. So again, there'll be opportunities coming through as the wind blows over, as I say, in the post-COVID world. Frost & Sullivan, in one of their reports, came out with something quite interesting. In 2015-16, there was a big peak in automobile sales, car sales. They sold around 3.5 million cars in the GCC alone. Now, they're predicting that because of the COVID impact, many of those consumers won't be buying or replacing their cars. Tends to be a 3 to 5 year cycle when GCC sort of citizens go out and change cars. They're predicting that there'll be a boom in service, spares, car rental, perhaps car leasing, and that sort of sector as people hang on to their cars until more certainty comes about in post-COVID. Another area where I think the Middle East lags behind compared to other parts of the world is e-commerce. It's still, the potential, the consumer power there is big, yet the e-commerce, I don't have the figures at hand, but the e-commerce sort of trading opportunities, volume, value doesn't reflect that. So that's another area that we will see opportunities coming through. I think consumers have now Middle Eastern businesses and consumers both have realized, look, during the lockdown when the large shopping malls were closed, the only way to do shopping was online, and there wasn't that infrastructure or lack of it there. So in the post-COVID world, we would expect to see demand for perhaps 5G, capabilities in terms of automation, data warehousing, logistics, e-commerce platforms, and those sort of areas. We also envisage there'll be a demand for us as companies begin to invest in the gaps that they've seen in their businesses in COVID.
So, we just heard there from Arshad some of the kind of key opportunities and innovations because of COVID, and some of the kind of things that we may quickly forget about. For example, long life food. He gave us an example there, and it springs to my mind that are you proactively out there marketing the types of companies that you want to come out to Bahrain?
Yeah, so we have the international network that I mentioned previously. We've got field offices in Asia, around Europe, and the Middle East obviously as well. And we use these offices to actually proactively target companies within each of these markets. And we've also got a great marketing department at head office as well, who push our proposition material out through various channels. And I feel like we're quite slick in that respect also. So we're coming at it from sort of different angles.
What we haven't talked about yet is the weather, very British, but actually the weather, the climate, you touched on it, Arshad, there, does that provide, I'll come to you first, Ross, an opportunity And there's a lot of talk about Build Back Better in the UK and in Europe, after post-COVID times, and the green economy. Is there a push for the green economy in the Middle East? Is that something that is an area that's being developed, looked at, any opportunities arise there? Straight to you first, Ross, and I'll come to you, Arshad.
Yeah, of course. It's something that I think most major economies around the world are looking at increasingly now, as we sort of shift to this sort of green and circular economy as well. An area that I work on within the EDB is manufacturing, and I'm the UK lead for the manufacturing, transport and logistics sector. And as part of that, we're now increasingly looking at packaging and sort of eco-friendly packaging, circular economy, that type of thing. So that's definitely a priority sector from our point of view as well.
Thank you. Just to bring you in, Arshad, the climate, you talked about it, and let's face it, living in Manchester, we don't get a very good climate. So, one of the attractions for me is to go out and just sit in some warmth. What opportunity, is there an opportunity there?
Yes, there is, certainly. I mean, let's face it. I mean, we're talking about some of these countries out in the Middle East where water costs more than a litre of petrol, litre per litre wise. So water is an expensive commodity there. A lot of water out there is desalinated, and that's a very expensive process. So anything for conserving the use of water, sort of hydro-related sort of activity in those countries, particularly in the GCC, where there are water issues out there. There are a lot of opportunities out there. And you talked about the green and you mentioned the circular economy. Morocco, for example, is building one of the largest solar farms in the world. Now, you remember, Morocco isn't an oil-rich country, but they've got plenty of sunshine, plenty of desert out there, and they can't continue to import expensive crude oil to sustain their sort of energy needs. So they're looking at greener and a more sort of cost-effective energy production sort of strategies. Solar is one of them. We've seen, for example, within Saudi Arabia, a large plastics and polymer sort of producing nation, probably the biggest plastics manufacturing base in the Middle East is Saudi Arabia, and now they're looking at sort of recycling plastics and using regrind materials in injection and extrusion molding applications. Look at Dubai, a big tourist destination, and now we see cycle lanes out there in parts of Dubai where now avid cyclists are, I don't know how they do it in that sunshine, but I'm seeing it that they are cycling to work. So there is a cultural shift driven by both government, encouraged by government, but also through consumer behavior. They want to be part of the green revolution.
And that green revolution, let's face it, we think I'm going to use the word advanced, but I don't take that lightly, is perhaps more mature in the UK market right now. There's a lot of focus on that. So there's opportunity there for businesses who are already in the delivering services to the UK market or maybe European market to actually tap into and actually go into the Middle East. And that's something that they can, for people who are listening in now today, thinking about this, can access support from both you, Arshad, and Ross on that, and think about what could happen.
And another thing I wanted to mention was, if you look at some of the largest fleets in the world now in terms of wide-bodied aircraft, Emirates, Etihad, Qatar, they have access to very cheap energy in terms of aviation fuel and the rest of it. But yet they have invested themselves, and that demonstrates the ethos out there is they've invested heavily in energy-efficient engines through Rolls-Royce and GE, etc. That's one of the biggest investments they've made, is they want lighter aircraft and more energy efficient aircraft to get out further on less fuel, not in terms of just profitability, but also the emissions the CO2 emissions, etc. And they've signed up to certain targets to hit those. So that's another, I wanted just to share that with you.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. You're listening to great commentators, Arshad and Ross, about Middle East and Bahrain, and about investing and starting a company there. What we hope you are hearing is some top tips and some nuggets of information that may just prick your ideas to think about the Middle East as a destination to go and invest and set your business up. Just coming towards a close, really, Arshad, you've had many years in this job. As I say, fantastic job title. You must have seen some success stories. Talk us through one or two and how that makes you feel.
yes, it's good that we see companies out there that have started off small and grown and not just in value and volume, but also their geographic spread. And I come across lots of examples of companies who have gone out there and grown, and they've started in a small company, perhaps a small country first. They thought, it's easy to get to, visa free, for example, and let's just dip our toe in the water. And as confidence then grows, they cross borders into, for example, they may have started in Bahrain or Saudi, which is very easy to get to, and then they cross, hang on, well, let's move into the next market next door, and then they look at Saudi Arabia, which is a lot bigger, a lot different, a lot more opportunity out there, and then that confidence gives them the drive and the ambition to look further. And we've used our associates and our embassies out in Saudi for market research, to help find distributors or agents out there, and that's what we're all about. So we've got boots on the ground there. We've got the embassy there, the associates there that can help with all of this. There's native people, native speaking people too, who've been there many years, who have contacts too out there. So we can do that research for you. We can do sort of a little bit of due diligence out there for you. So to take the legwork out of it and to give you that little bit of a heads up in that sort of region.
You can't ask for more than that, can you? As a listener who's wanted to go to the Middle East, all that support that you're offering there, Arshad, and also the job satisfaction it gives you, which is great to see. And similarly to you, Ross, as well, you must see some companies dipping the toe into this area, maybe just flirting with the idea, but actually going out there and, dare I say, smashing it. So what's your examples and how does that make you feel in your professional life?
Yeah, so it's always great to get successes. I'm fairly new into the role. There's a lot going on, especially after we come out of sort of lockdown in the UK. I've noticed certainly an uptake in the number of people that are certainly interested in having discussions around Bahrain and the Middle East, which is obviously great for us. One of the kind of big case studies that we talk about is that Amazon Web Services, AWS, set up their first sort of data center region in the Middle East and in Bahrain. And this was a great example from certainly a Bahrain point of view, because we took the Team Bahrain approach with central government, the EDB, as well as other agencies locally, to actually land this project, which is a great example of sort of collaboration between agencies in the kingdom.
So to wrap up, Arshad, I want your top tips. So I'm sitting here now, I'm in a company, I may be thinking about long life shelf food, for example. I might actually be in that. How opportunistic and how serendipitous that would be. But what would you advise I do? Give me a couple of minutes of your time.
Okay, so here are my take-home tips for you. Give us a call. That's what we're there for. Happy to help, whether it's finance through UKEF or through looking at a new market. So give us a call. There's 30 of us in the Northwest, all at your service. Do your homework, I would say. Go out, visit the market and visit it again. Remember, I've always said this, that the Middle East is it's not just transactional, it's about relationships. They want to know you. They want to know you as a person. They want to know about your family, your interests, and it's a person-to-person thing, especially with those Middle Eastern countries, the Arabs. They love relationships. It's all about family, nature, relationships, culture, and they want to know you as a person. So remember that, and think about it as a long-term. Commit to it. It's an investment. Go out there, visit it again, and once you get that order. Like a joiner once said to me, you measure it twice and then cut it once. So you check your documentation twice and then you ship it once. Make sure you know the process. A lot of companies think it's just like shipping to France, and they send off their goods only to find there's difficulty. So make sure that you know of the full import and the documentation process. If you have doubts, give us a call. We can help you through that process too. But yes, it's a long haul process. Relationships matter, and once you're in there, the ease of doing business and moving through the region, it will happen phenomenally fast.
Thank you, Arshad. The takeaway there to the listener really is relationships, isn't it? Relationships. Yes, there's going to be red tape. Yes, there's going to be rules to follow. Absolutely, but relationships is extremely key. We take that away from Arshad. That's fantastic advice. And Ross, just turning to you finally, your advice to anyone who wants to grow their company into Bahrain, what top tips would you give them?
Yes, it's similar to Arshad actually. He said people do business with people. And I think at the beginning, I think that's a really good point. The biggest thing for me is certainly relationships, and really investing time and creating these relationships with people on the ground. Do your due diligence on potential partners on the ground, and like Arshad said as well, just get in touch with either myself and the Bahrain EDB team in the UK, or DIT. DIT have got a fantastic team in Bahrain as well that are able to support investors and those looking to do business in the kingdom. So just make the most of the resources that are available. They're all free to access, and that's our job. We're there to support you. So just get in touch with either myself or Arshad direct, and we're always happy to support.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this Inspiring International Potential podcast. If you're interested in finding out more about doing business in the Middle East, we've got a handy guide on the subject which we can send you. Simply email marketing@tradenw.org or visit international.growthco.uk and go to the podcast section on the site to download this episode's PDF. Watch out for our up and coming episodes where we're talking about the healthcare and chemical sectors and exploring opportunities in international markets such as India and Africa. My greatest thanks go to both Arshad and Ross for your generous time and insight. It's been a fascinating discussion, and I hope listeners will take a lot away from this. Thank you very much.